Hey everyone, welcome to another StarCraft 2 cast. This time we have a best of three between Cure and GuMiHo from the KSL, the Korean StarCraft League, which you can support over on the Patreon, patreon.com/Korean StarCraft League, which you should definitely do if you love watching these players, especially such unique players like GuMiHo, or the only player who can continuously take TVT to Maru, Cure. Actually, both of these guys. Some of the only ones that have repeatedly beaten Maru, perhaps not in series. For Cure, that would be the case. He seems to pretty much supposed to win the series, and then, you know, Maru does his comeback thing, and then unfortunately wins the final game, and Cure is like, oh, so close. That's been happening to Cure a lot, but GuMiHo actually has defeated Maru a couple of times in the series of TVT that they have played, and that is still a considerable feat. So as far as the TVT between these particular two, I don't know what to expect. GuMiHo is going to be a little bit of a weirder player most of the time, and Kira is going to be a more stable player, but when it comes to TVT, that might not necessarily be the case. GuMiHo actually was quite the standard TVT player when he was facing Maru, and it was actually Maru who was changing things up, who was trying to be perhaps even overly aggressive, considering that it didn't work out, so you can kind of say that as a criticism. GuMiHo was able to win with some solid TVT. Nothing shenaniganry about it. Is that a word? That's a word now. So I don't know. Both of them might be playing ultimately standard. If there is going to be any type of deviation, it would be from GuMiHo, I would expect. Perhaps some type of mech or slightly altered early game push, but I mean, TVT does demand, I think, a certain amount of rigidity. There's some things you can do, so it's not like it's always a factory expand. And actually, case in point, 1x expand from GuMiHo, although factory expand still does take up the majority of TVTs. We do have our 2-Rex openers, proxied or unproxied or single proxy into the 2-1-1 that Maru was throwing at GuMiHo and was ineffective. You do have faster 3cc builds, but still generally if you're going to go into 2 bases, you go into 3. And you do occasionally have mech, but that's still pretty rare and only seen from the likes of GuMiHo, perhaps a special game actually, if you manage to catch some of those. But ultimately overall, you know what we expect, factory expand, and then into the Raven push, and who actually controls it better. I'm hoping for some actual back and forth Marine tank action, because this series came recommended from the producers? I don't know if that's the right word. From the people who make the KSL happen. There you go. Right now we have GuMiHo with a slight early lead. Not only did he get away with the 1-Rex expand, but then also delayed Cure's natural even further thanks to some nice Reaper control. So GuMiHo furthering that 1-Rex expand lead with that. Now generally for the factory expand players, they do have some more early game units, a little more firepower, but you can see that GuMiHo, without building that reactor, has actually built up to a Reaper and 4 Marines. So if he had a reactor, he probably has 2 Marines literally just pop out and 2 more on the way, which would have been a little spicy, but then his Hellion was also about to come out too. Cure might have factory expanded, but he didn't really put a lot of emphasis on the early game. 2 Reapers, 2 Hellions, not a big fire, hit squad right there. Not going to do a lot of damage most of the time. And GuMiHo, even going for his own second Hellion, really is quite well prepared to handle anything that could be coming his way with the splits, the concave going on as well, and continuously building those Marines. No stopping the reactor. Now, this is going to hit him eventually. You have a little less Marine production. In the grand scheme of things, probably really worth it. And actually, he's the one that's going to go for a medevac here. So he opens up more economical. He now has a 3-worker lead. Oh, it is going to be mech as well, 2-base mech. But he is going to be adding on that medevac to go for the aggression, whereas Cure is going for a very, very, very standard opener. A little bit of that early aggression with 2 Reaper, 2 Hellion into the very safe Cyclone, and then into the expected Reactor Marines and Raven production, probably up to 2. Maybe even 3. But now the deal here for game 1 is, does Cure figure out that not only is it mech, but it's also 2-base mech? That is the rub. That is something that Cure probably won't be able to figure out anytime soon. Should he use his auto turret harassment, he might get a glimpse, but then I'd imagine him coming in this way and stopping here, or coming in this way and stopping here, which that faster 4th gas I mean, might have been a tell if he had seen it immediately, but he's not sending the Raven over, so yeah, he's not going to figure that one out. Interesting decision here from GuMiHo. So we have seen some 2-base, 2-starport play, that actually has hit the meta and is a build that is brought out every once in a while, but 2-base, 2-factory, reactored starport, so you're still going to have a decent amount of that air control, but it's possible that your opponent can eventually match you, and that's actually what Kira is doing, going into his own reactored Vikings. Not a guarantee with a more standard TVT build, but obviously a choice. And then the 2 Ravens did delay his Viking count, but we know how good 2 Ravens can be. So it's not guaranteed, I suppose, that GuMiHo is going to have that air control. But for the initial wave, he will, and then Defender's Advantage might kick in. But he'll have that number of tanks that is simply unexpected, not the relatively low number that accompanies some early game pushes, because you can only build 1 tank out of 1 factory most of the time, but literally double that. So we had GuMiHo actually with the scan here, sees the 3cc setup, and also sees, determines that it's sim. Although that is canceled, so I don't know. Kira might also be going into his own mech, surprisingly enough. Now, Hellions just got into the natural, only 4 Hellions managing to cause some serious havoc, and well, 4 Hellions, I guess, do. It's more so that they were able to skirt on by. Kira had taken an offensive position to cut off any early game attack that is pretty typical to TVT, and GuMiHo just got kind of lucky being able to smoothly run those in. 7 SCVs down after Kira had already taken a SCV deficit because of the early game. Now, GuMiHo looks to actually be doing this opener in a defensive way that does put off your 3rd CC, but obviously not as much as Kira's anyway. And GuMiHo's getting his on his location off to the right side, something that Kira I just don't think is picked up on yet. Now, that is an extreme number of Vikings. That would be a little bit curious. You'd want to know exactly why they decided to go up to that many. If they're going for a typical build, where's their Ravens, right? And you could probably start figuring out something there. Just because we do need that mech air control when you are going into mech. I said that maybe that stim was a fake because it was canceled, but it looks like it was just canceled in favor of something else initially, but eventually the idea is that Kira is going to go into bio. Now this is really awkward looking. GuMiHo's Vikings are on Kira's side of the map, inside of the base, accompanying the medevac drop, which Kira was like, this isn't really doing much, this is no problem. And now Kira's army is out in the middle of the map being like, what the hell? Why would you do this? No one goes for the surprise backstab Vikings, but there you have it. Now, they can't do very much. They were unable to land on top of the tanks that Kira had sieged up, so overall, maybe not that impressive, and might also be lacking now the support back at home, but that's so many tanks early on, but they're on siege, running into Kira's army unexpectedly. GuMiHo is like, why aren't you running back home? What are you doing on this side of the map? But the Vikings are also returning, and this is getting a little weird here. Those tanks had to retreat so far back to finally get sieged up. 3 of them taken out of the equation, but the Vikings will dominate on the ground. The SCVs, I'm not even sure they had to be pulled here. The Vikings will trade out, and the SCVs will lose many of their lives, but oh, so many. 18 SCVs went down with that hold. Those 3 tanks taken out of the equation made that possible for Kira to do the damage that he did, and it looks like had he not pulled the SCVs, it might have been game over. Unfortunate, however, because maybe he could have pulled the SCVs back and at least saved an extra 6, because for the longest time it was stopped at 12. So if he had saved 6, he's actually pretty much on par with Kira's worker count. And now he's down 4. Now, that's still not the biggest of deals, apparently, because he got his 3rd CC so much faster on location. He's able to continuously pump out the SCV production, which he's really good about. And, they immediately get to work, basically. So the actual income hasn't changed all that much, I suppose. Obviously, dips in favor of Kira because the SCVs were pulled off the line. Speaking of, once again, pulled off the line as Kira uses his Vikings to go for some harassment. So he's not going to be building anymore by the looks of things. This will be a sacrifice of basically his entire map control. Apparently he has 4 Vikings. I don't know where the other 2 are. Somewhere around, but like he's not building anymore, right? You've accepted that they are going to be taking that map control, but whenever you catch those Vikings out of position, or you have more bio-centric armies than mech, because he opens up the tech way that TVT does, the bio does kick the Vikings' ass. So in that hold in particular, it was a little more mech versus mech, so the Vikings were extraordinarily important. But as the bio continues to be built up here from Cure with the medivacs to get the healing as much as they can, if GuMiHo has to land the Vikings, it's just not going to be as effective. Cure's army is looking quite strong. Not a lot of Marauders in here on the front lines quite yet, but he is now up to triple Marauder production, comfortable in his own 3 bases, and should be heading on to his own 4th, especially since he just saw that GuMiHo had already snuck in an entire command center. You do start to bank a little bit of the minerals as you mech, of course, but GuMiHo is going, just emphasizing that 4th base straight up. He could have been producing more factories or more tanks, but he's actually stopped at 4 factories, which is a little abnormal. The production setup is the same between bio and mech, really, assuming that you get the correct economy underway as well, which is usually one factory or barracks, 3 factory or barracks, 5 factory barracks, and then up to 8. So that's a little bit different, but it looks like that's something that he's just accepting, and the faster command center will turn into a planetary to safeguard the left side. Right side might not be as safe as GuMiHo is hoping, however. A couple of tanks late to the siege are now getting taken down by the bio pouncing on top of them, and this 3rd base will be broken. Now, GuMiHo is getting a couple of Liberators, so that will be able to clear out the tanks. Very little bio left over here from Cure, and he did give up the idea of trying to take map control. So those Liberators will be very important, but GuMiHo really needed these bases up and running. And he needs to go ahead and get those Liberators in position. There we go. There it is. All right. So GuMiHo will be quick to getting his 3rd CC back on location. Even going to try and chase any amount of units down. There's one little Marines trying to be a hero. Cure goes for an on-location 4th command center. He does need to make up for a little bit of time, but also he is the map control player. He's the bio player, so he's kind of supposed to get away with this. GuMiHo had pushed off upgrades considerably. Not uncommon for mech, but very much a push off on the upgrades after 4 CC. So double upgrades are now on the way to make up for some lost time. But that has also been a weakness of his. Cure starting to move over into more of that air domination game, which bio just inevitably has to get into. Bio has a finite amount of time in which he could possibly overrun a mech player, and then you have to accept you're not going to overrun them for the most part. And it seems that Cure has gone ahead and accepted that. That temporary break on the 3rd did not last very long, and the fact that the 4th base was up and running during that time means he really didn't hit GuMiHo's economy or his production capabilities, right, more importantly, as much as he was hoping. It did not snowball into the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So Cure is heading to his triple starports. GuMiHo still only on 1 starport. Again, 4 factories, not 5. And he's barely affording that. So he's absolutely correct to be doing this. The, I guess, insistence on the starport production really hampering some of what is usually the factory production. Although you can kind of see what he's done here on purpose. 2 tech labs, 2 reactors, so at any time he could pump out a round of 4 Hellions and try and take some amount of map control. Not control exactly, but get something out on the map and try and at least harass Cure's bases, which hasn't really done very much so far. But it's better to have it, and they do some usefulness as a Hellbats on the front line. Now, at this point, GuMiHo should be concerned about the transfer over into starports. It's just the inevitable way that this game is played, but then you also start to pick up on a lack of aggression from the bio player and a lack of remaxing on the bio units. So that's when the Terran player who's playing mech maybe starts to also double down on the starports, something that GuMiHo has done, but then also might start to add on missile turrets in case they've misjudged how quickly the other Terran player can get into their own air superiority. Now, the blue flame has kicked in. It's been there for a while, I want to say, so there is always a chance that it will get some big numbers. So far, really not the biggest. A lot of the SCV kills over the entire course of 13.5-minute game, right? So while 9 go down there, that looks like a good number. On 4 bases, easy to replace if you even want to. At this point in time, you don't have to. Also a stall on a 5th command center. Well, that's more like a 6th or a 7th or something, because we have extra command centers coming down for Cure. Ditto on GuMiHo's side. They both are not maxed out yet, but basically have each reached a point in which they are very comfortable affording extra command centers for the future, because nothing's going to be determined in the next minute. So they are very much getting set up for that late game TVT. We didn't have a lot of back and forth action, but we're definitely going to get into a macro game. Quadruple starport now for Cure. Fusion Core, I believe, has already built the lib range. Indeed, it has, and already a attack upgrade on Kier's mech army. He probably also wants to go up the double armory, though, the way that this game is going. GuMiHo's double armory still kicking out those 2-2 more so ground upgrades, but of course the armor affects both ground and air. I would not be surprised if he stalls, just doesn't bother getting +3 attack, as good of an upgrade as it can be. The emphasis will be on the air. And, wow, I mean, very shortly. It is right now. They're just not combating each other. Like, obviously, they both are emphasizing the air. It's just no one was really willing to go onto this side of the map and try and do something with it. The number of Vikings is going to get a bit silly. The number of Liberators here from Kier is also worth noting. 8 Liberators. You don't really need that many. He's going with 10 Liberators to siege on top of the opponent's units if you win the air war. But what that many Liberators can do is, you know, a portion of them could siege, and then the rest of them could contribute to the air fight. Liberator anti-air isn't what it used to be, but it is still something, and if you have a big enough number of Liberators, it absolutely will contribute to the air fight. Also, with that many Liberators, as soon as a Thor accidentally walks into the range, right, trying to maneuver in for its own shot, it will get obliterated. So there is that. There is certainly merit to having more than 2 or 4 Liberators. Time to kill those pesky little bio and medevac units. Who cares about them at this point in time, right? GuMiHo, now confident in his army, is starting to try and actually be the one with map control. He's brought some SCVs to repair as well, because why not? And he's about to finish up his 2-2 upgrades. Transformation servos also on the way. Certainly a worthwhile upgrade to get in this type of game, and just basically as the game progresses into late, perhaps even late game. Well, I'll let you know when we're late game, when battle cruisers start arriving, which we could get into. Abso-freaking-lutely. I believe the first one to try to do it would probably be GuMiHo, but yeah, both players could try and get into that. Now, we do not have GuMiHo going into the air ship weapons. He does bother getting that +3 ground attack. That's all fine and good, but that will mean that as far as the air goes, he will only have that 2 upgrade lead as opposed to a 3 or 4 one, which... well, I guess it's kind of, like, it depends on what you mean by a lead, I guess. Like, so one person has +2 ship weapons, one person has +2 armor on their Vikings. So I guess, yeah, it balances out. So, okay, that means if we finally have those 2 armories, we do finally have the 2 armories. I'm just kind of like, I'm having trouble tracking the production tab. So many reds. It's +3 armor finishing, +3 ship weapon on the way, and +1 armor for Cure finally on the way, too. All right, so they'll basically be even on upgrades then. I'm still a little surprised that GuMiHo is not going for ship weapons. It feels like a lot of Terrans at this point in time would actually do that, but it is what it is. It does still contribute to the Thor weapons, for instance, which might be something that he's thinking about. Because at this point in time, tanks attack and ground is not the emphasis. That's why +3 is oftentimes pushed off or just completely not gotten in a game like this. It's already progressed so fast into the Supreme late game. Or almost Supreme. Again, that's probably battle cruisers. That's a lot of Liberators. That's 10 Liberators with +2 ship weapons and a Liberage upgrade. I don't think they have a kill shot difference in this matchup, to be fair, but still, kind of intimidating. The Viking War is underway, apparently, and none of the Liberators are helping, but then again, none of the Thors are getting obliterated as soon as they try. Here we go, Liberators on siege and going to help out because Cure was losing, specifically the Viking War. But one more Thor still impacting the battle, and overall, that going just swingingly for GuMiHo means that GuMiHo does push Cure back. However, Cure has a little hit squad of leftover ground units on the right side attacking that vulnerable orbital command, which doesn't really matter so much more as far as the mining, but you do not want them to go ahead and hop over to your natural or on top of this production, for instance. So it does have to be taken care of, and it will rather quickly, but Cure needed that time to rebuild his own Viking counts, perhaps even repair up some units. As far as the base count, that's relatively even. We do have Cure with the top left base taken as a planetary as well. But GuMiHo is taking the gold base, reestablishing his third orbital. He's got extra orbitals as well to mule drop. He's adding on cyclones at this point in time. He's definitely one of the Terrans who can be a little experimental throughout the entire game. And I would say going into cyclones at 19-minute TVT is a little experimental. Sometimes it's a bit desperate. They produce fairly quickly. Although, if the patch goes through, they're going to be reactor, and that'll be real quick. And they do, of course, hit that air. which is becoming increasingly more and more the emphasis. And because they're much more mobile, they can also maybe take out the Liberators before they siege up, and the Vikings will have that troublesome decision between staying in the air and grounding themselves to help out against those Cyclones. So this can be tricky. This has certainly changed the way that they're going to attack into each other. I mean, with Viking versus Viking, it's basically like, okay, I guess we'll try and then see who wins out, because it's so hard to tell who has more Vikings when it's all in a bundle. But with the Cyclones, you know that, if your Cyclones, if the Liberators aren't sieged up on them, the Cyclones are just going to tear down your Viking count. So, definitely need some more ground army. A couple of Widow Mines also helping out. Now, that's going to help in that situation against the ground army, but is also potentially going to be a bait for Kyr's Vikings, since it's still his most mobile army. It's really his only army, so, that's going to be kind of scary. Those two Widow Mines are going to eventually rearm, and he has that taken care of them. There's the scan, but are they going to be target fired? That Thor still helping out, but perhaps not for very long. Liberators take care of that. As far as the Viking count, we do have Kyr winning the actual air war, and since the Liberators are sieged up, the Cyclones cannot come to help. At best, they could help the retreats, but the retreat came in rather late. GuMiHo had very much lost the Viking war by the time he tried to pull it back, only saving 3 Vikings. He does manage to take down that planetary, however, so he's got that going for him. I just don't know if that was really worth it. That was a pretty big loss of very expensive units, and GuMiHo's bases had not yet actually been set up and saturated. For instance, his third, never taken. It got planted and never got muled, never got its gases back. The gold base never got its gases, only had a couple of SCVs, which a Marauder has now denied, and this base only just recently finished. So GuMiHo, had he had saturation on all these bases, I think is already remaxed, pretty much no problem, but he didn't. He did not have his foundation back at home as set up as he would like, should he take a bad battle. And he did take a bad battle. Now it's time for Kyr to shine. He's got the maxed out army. He's got the superior army as well right now. And he is looking to do some damage. Also a very superior bank here. Kyr can take a bad battle and remax, as he's taking his right side base as well. Saturated that up. Now GuMiHo, kind of being the bio player in this situation, is going to try and go for a couple of base trades. Some desperate Widow Mines getting planted, but taken out by the Liberators. So the base of GuMiHo going to go down. These other ones not really, again, mining all of that much. And GuMiHo, at the very least, has denied a base of mining from Kyr. I would say, the fact that Kyr has this base up and running and gas about to be taken, and this huge bank means that this doesn't really matter as much. GuMiHo needs to settle his bases and actually get gas mining again if he hopes to win this game. That is the main problem. We got a planetary holding the line. Fortunately, Liberators cannot shoot buildings. Thank God the co-op upgrade isn't in there, but they can deny mining, so that's that. That's good enough, and we have 2 denied bases, but GuMiHo just lost an Orbital his 3rd, Orbital his 5th, and is just simply not mining from very much, and gold mining is not necessarily what he needs right now. He needs gas so desperately. Landed Vikings take on the planetary ASAP, no problem. And the orbital of Kyr on the other side will live to replan itself a little bit later on. It does feel like Kyr has taken a dominant position in this game as he once again lands the Vikings, a takedown at another planetary. GuMiHo does not have any, I think, bare command centers that he could shift over for a planetary later on. He's going to be down to orbitals, which, obviously if they lift, they get decimated by the Vikings. Oh, hey, the Widow Mines actually coming into play here, and GuMiHo has been silently stacking the Viking count, man. He has been building, put every last resource into it, and he is dominating the skies. 38 Vikings to 22. He's running over a couple of missile turrets, though, and that's making things awkward. Also a handful of Marines. Just nothing that shoots down for GuMiHo means that he can't really surprise and conquer with such a maneuver. He can just surprise and then leave. That's not nearly as impactful. Now, Kyr knows that a lot of the army of GuMiHo is purely in Vikings, so he could even think about just going back into ground, I would say. Now, that's not what he's doing. He is just continuing to pump out 8 Vikings at a time, almost matching his opponent, but I mean, it might not be a bad idea. Kyr can really decide to do a lot of things because he has such a big bank. He has production on both ends, bio and air, and he's still mining, although maybe not off this base very long. GuMiHo, with that mineral bank, is going to be able to use Hellions to great effect, and there are still a lot of orbitals, but oh, okay, we got another battle going on here. Liberators looked that they went first to help tear down GuMiHo's Viking population, and it was effective. Kyr now winning the Viking war by 9, also giving chase. GuMiHo desperately trying to run away, trying to recollect himself. Does he actually have a chance of winning this particular battle? I would say no, but Kyr is running away. Perhaps scared that there's widow mines or reinforcements, or just, you know, having trouble deciphering that he's in fact winning the Viking War by so much. It can be hard to tell, both parties with injured Vikings as well. That wasn't a benefit that GuMiHo had. GuMiHo is simply going to lose the Viking War, and Kira just needed the confidence to go ahead and take it down. That is game number 1. GuMiHo not able to make mech work, although we jumped very quickly into Sky Terran and Air Mech, if you will. You know, the beginning was mech, and so we kind of blame that, kind of. I would say overall, of course, it was just that GuMiHo was unable to win some of these key Viking battles and then do something with it. Kira really took over the map. GuMiHo struggled too long on the economy situation. So Kira looking to be a slightly better macro TV tier. Let's see if GuMiHo has another trick up his sleeve for game 2. In the top left of game 2, we do have GuMiHo, and in the bottom right, it is Kira. Playing in the semifinals of the KSL of this week, I believe, just a couple of days ago. A lot of the same Korean players signing up for this tournament. So you get a lot of narratives. I'm not sure how often GuMiHo Cure happens, but I believe it did happen the week before. I'll also be casting some Dark versus Hero series, which is a very popular online match, since they pretty religiously sign up for these online cups. At least as far as the Korean-only ones. I do believe they're also pretty consistent about signing up for the EPT-NA, for instance. But with that said, I guess I could have just go ahead and look at who is generally favored. I mean, if you asked me who would be favored here, I would have said Cure even before that game. It's just that GuMiHo has surprised us by taking down the likes of Maru. And his macro and micro is certainly not his weakness anymore most of the time. There is a lot of a lot of doubt in my voice for that one, because it does still occasionally feel like, because GuMiHo is like a little bit worse than the mechanics, that's why he loses, less so that he his strategy didn't work out or his weirdness, you know, hurts him. But he really has had a lot of games in the last year where his mechanics were actually better than his opponent. So I don't want to blame that too often like I used to. But then if again, you were to be like, well, really, who do you think has better mechanics? I would say Cure. Anyway, GuMiHo does show off some very good TVT on occasion, but perhaps not as reliably as Cure is what I'm getting at. And perhaps that is sometimes that his mechanics look a little bit weaker, but sometimes it is just the way of things, and maybe his battle didn't go as well, he misjudged the number of Vikings, so on. Kira definitely winning that last game because he made sure to have a very good foundation, whereas I made sure to note that GuMiHo had a very large gap in time in which he just simply didn't transfer SCVs, and that's the type of mechanical problem that I would just talk about. So mechanics can just be as simple as who's producing the SCVs as continuously, which actually GuMiHo was winning for a while, or who micros that weaken Marines back a little bit better, sure, but it can also be such as making sure to take the moment to set down your SCV line. That little gap, that little moment of forgetfulness can end up killing you, and it kind of felt like it did kill GuMiHo because he took a bad fight at the same time, of course. Well, GuMiHo is going to go into another 1-Rex expand, and so let's see if he goes into another 2-fact opener. Kira not in the mood to try and punish any such attempts, has not done any proxies, although that could be done against someone who always 1-Rex expands, even if they end up SCV scouting, which I don't believe GuMiHo did. This is, I think, well, maybe he did, actually. No, this actually wasn't SCV scout. SCV scout. Even if they SCV scout, that could still be very terrifying for them because they have to change their build. As soon as they realize you're 2-Rexing them, they have to not get their command center, which their SCV scout should be at a time which they haven't already started it. And then they have to get their gases in their own factory, so If this was a best of 5 and GuMiHo 1x expanded twice in a row, Cure might start the third game with a 2x, you know, but not in a best of 3 second game. Cure just happy with his factory expand. Now the one to build the medevac. Gonna go across the map with 2 Reapers, 4 Marines, and a Hellion. It's a bit of a ragtag crew. It's about to head right into a Cyclone. That's not the ideal situation. Yeah. Marine's almost body blocking. I'm a little surprised that Cure even went back in to save those units. Unfortunately, that was one of the better case scenarios for GuMiHo, in which not only did he have a Cyclone in position, he also manages to collect a couple of lives and about, well, more than half the damage on the medevac. Where if Cure had seen a Cyclone and just boosted back out, like, nope, 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 that would have been better for him, right? GuMiHo's medevac also looking around for Cure's. He carried over that Cyclone specifically to track it down. Cure manages to avoid being killed and now has a couple more units to help out in the defense. GuMiHo's drop, I don't think it's all that intimidating as far as the actual drop itself. It's going to be able to stall at the third command center, and that's always a good catch. I believe he caught the side of that wood of mine, absolutely. Cyclone lock-on was a bit wasted there for Cure, too, and it's little tiny little, you know, bits here. More importantly than anything we're witnessing on the screen is the 5-worker difference. GuMiHo once again getting the lead in the early game, somewhat off of the back of a 1x expands. Generally, I would say that's more of like 3 SCV lead, not 4 or 5, but here we are. GuMiHo theoretically in a much better position, but Cure was able to bring it back in the last game and even dominated the final portion. A scan is going to reveal the intent on a third CC and bioplay. Even sees the second barracks for a full confirmation. That's not going to get a canceled stim there. He also was able to see that it is indeed a reactor, starports, and I believe that scan might have even caught a couple of Ravens. So really the best scan ever. that actually got everything you need to know. GuMiHo is going into his own BO3 barracks. His stim is much faster as he did skip the Viking production. Now, this scan from Cure is going to be interesting. If you compare it to just your own build back at home, you'll notice that GuMiHo's second and third barracks are done with reactors. So I believe that's enough information to say, okay, this guy didn't go for Vikings. That stim's probably faster than mine, but I'm going to have air control. And my opponent might very well probably is producing medevacs. And if Cure is just going to go ahead and do that as much as I think he can with that information, then he should be playing a little defensive initially. So not as eagerly getting to his third CC as GuMiHo, for instance, who very much is entitled to get his on location. And then GuMiHo takes the map control, takes the initial presence in the first 8 minutes, and Cure eventually gets his own stim and combat shields, and it's probably a fairly even game at that point. 3 workers killed from Cure's medevac drop by the looks of things is already done enough to put Cure in a slight worker lead. I feel like I might have reversed the... I'm getting a moment of like, did I just do a stupid thing? Cure's caught up in the workers considerably. I guess this was the SCV pool right there. Okay, yeah. I mean, his third CC was done faster, just like GuMiHo's was on location, so I suppose he's been producing triple SCV a little while longer. So that does make sense. Okay. But like I said, Cure is the one that's stuck on his base initially. He knows that the map control goes to GuMiHo with such an opener, but his technology is far superior. The fact that he has a little bit of air control to tear down his opponent's medevacs, but then also, biggest thing, 2 Ravens to none. That's something you really got to consider. Cure does eventually need to make the move to get to his third CC. Right now, that's temporary worker lead, I suppose he had. Now GuMiHo was ahead by 3 again. It's not really a lead because he's so oversaturated in that natural. You can see with the numbers right here, GuMiHo is dominating the mineral income. Cure thinks about going for a double drop, decides against it, and instead going to try and actually bust out. Not only does he have the Vikings and the Ravens, but he also has 1-1 faster than his opponent. Not by too much, but still. And while his combat shields wasn't done, it looks like he figured the army was good enough to push out. Combat shields not being done is still a bit of a worry, even if he has that armor upgrade lead. But at this point, we also have defender's advantage kicking in. So GuMiHo's reinforcements have not yet caught up to the front lines, meaning Cure has a bigger army in the actual battle. Now GuMiHo's reinforcements are over here, but a couple of units back at home is all it takes to really make a difference as Kira sets up a defensive position and again has that tech superiority. Now his own combat shields are done, his upgrades are done as well, and he is super quick to starting up that 2-2, so he will hold on to a slight upgrade lead, assuming that GuMiHo is equally as quick. Indeed he is, so it's a slight upgrade lead for Kira, but those 2 Ravens in his back pocket could still make all of the difference. Kira is down a couple of workers, but looks to be enough to saturate completely with the gases, and that's what's most important. Does not start up his own +1 vehicle attack, and that could affect more of the mid-game TVT here. You probably should. A +2 attack that you eventually get to does affect the kill shot of tanks on Sim Marines, so... He's got the resources for it, too. A little supply blocked, though. Whoops-a-daisy. GuMiHo, mechanically, looking a little better, I suppose. But not able to find an opening quite yet. GuMiHo's supply a little bit farther ahead than his opponents. But again, Ravens and Defender's advantage still having to be considered. GuMiHo not considering that an opening, just pulls back. His own 4th CC is almost done, and Kira is yet to start his own. Yeah, not starting it at all. Finally starts up that +1 attack on the vehicle weapons, but way later than GuMiHo's. Well, GuMiHo has taken his map control and used it rather well. He's not been able to find any killing blow, which is always the ideal, but he has taken the map control, built up a superior economy for a little while, so his bank is looking really good, and is getting a faster 4th command center. He acknowledges the tech difference, and so he's got to respect Kira's army, but if he does have superior numbers, he might still be able to do something, and it's a slightly superior number situation for GuMiHo, though many, many Marines over on the south side, scouted by a very important Marine there. Kira's going to have to send some units back, but that's a lot of Marines simming on in here, grabbing the center tower, and not going to go for very much more by the looks of things. Retreating back to that tank. The Marines without medevacs, with a sim again, maybe obliterated by, well, the rest of Kira's army. In fact, as Kira maybe just scanned the middle and saw that he wasn't going to be jumped on, just made the safe call and pulled back entirely. Gonna rebuild the center tower immediately, no problem there. Starts up his 3-3 again, so freaking fast, very on point about that. Whereas GuMiHo maybe a little bit later, and Kira's 4th CC finally also finishes. As far as the timing of their 4th economies, it's really not that different. GuMiHo didn't have any SCVs transferred over. But man, they are lightning fast about the upgrades. So only like a 10-second difference in the bio upgrades. Oh boy, oh geez, oh lord. GuMiHo with the Doom Drop heading into the main base of Kira. Kira's got 3 missile turrets, a Cyclone, and a tank even. Sieged up. Is this actually going to be the right move here? 1 medevac instantly going down. Second one also going to fall. Third also about to fall, but it is going to fully unload. Is this really the best unload? That is a lot of Marines, but only 1 tank that is interference matrix. So far, nice handling from Kira. He does lose a lot of SCVs, but he will take down so much of GuMiHo's army, who also got miscontrolled for a hot second there. Not that it mattered, as he tried to attack the 3rd CC at the same time. It's off-timed, honestly. That was not it. If GuMiHo had been able to hit this 3rd faster with this little hit squad, maybe he does do the damage he required, but he just lost a lot of army in the main to a Doom Drop, and then he also lost the army on the 3rd, and now he's going to lose the army on the 4th. GuMiHo is not going to have an army to defend the counterattack. This could have been timed out much better, but even then, it's question marks. Because even if this was timed out perfectly, GuMiHo still set up a situation in which he would be attacking or taking an engagement with only a certain portion of his army. So at the end of the day, it still would have been one of those, okay, I killed your economy, but you have the bigger army situations. Well, now it's just like, I didn't even really kill all that much of your economy, and you have the bigger army. It's just the worst situation possible for GuMiHo. And GuMiHo, I think, has also realized he's really messed up. He is definitely on the back foot now, desperately trying to pump out a tank count. A couple of Marines in the main base do manage to distract Kira for about 5 seconds. And that's it. Kira knows he has the advantage, and now he even has Liberators joining up with his Sky advantage. And that's going to break GuMiHo's very desperate, small tank line. I don't even think that Liberators are necessary. It is very clear that GuMiHo just cannot remax fast enough. Even though he had a bank and he had an economy, the amount of army that he lost in such quick succession is really the problem. And that's going to be it. GuMiHo going to go for one last-ditch effort to go for a base trade, but it's not going to be as impactful. Kir is about to knock on the door of GuMiHo's production. He's killed 28 SCVs, denied mining on a base. This base not mining to the top right. GuMiHo does deny the third CC from mining, and Kir's fourth is hardly mining, actually. So as far as the income, it's not looking so great for either player, but the problem is that one person desperately needs an army and they can't rebuild it, and the other person still has an army. Kir's army is totally fine, and in fact, what he needs to build up again is probably his marine count, which is the cheapest and fastest thing to do. His tank count at 10 is still fine. 8 Vikings, 3 Liberators, lost the Ravens at some point, but yeah. The Marines, easiest thing to rebuild, and we have so many Marines back at home, now able to stop the potential base trade that GuMiHo is looking for. GuMiHo losing his 4th base, as well as 12 SCVs further. He has not rebuilt any. Surprisingly, Kir's army is out of position, and there's a chance the Marines of GuMiHo could jump on top of Kir's production, so it's not quite over yet, but it's just such a big army difference. 40 army supply difference isn't as bad as it once was, but still not great. The tank's forced to reposition, now not involved in the fight as soon as they possibly could be, and it looks like the marine count of Kir with the SCV pool will be able to tear down GuMiHo's base trade force, and that will indeed be it. Kir with the 2-0 here. And overall, better approach, better mid to late game, I suppose. In the first game, it was a lot about the Viking War, which is its own brand of TVT. In the second game, it was GuMiHo not putting the brakes on, you know, when he should have. Had he done the Doom drop, lost the army in such a fashion, but then realized he was about to be in a very precarious position and held off on the 3rd attack and the 4th attack, he probably stabilizes. He loses the map control, which he very much needs in his situation because Kir had the Viking Liberator combination, but his supply looks a lot better and a chance for a base trade would have been a lot scarier. But he just gave away so much army. So yeah, not able to put on the brakes at the appropriate time, which really is a skill when you're doing this style of play, something that you see a lot from Beyond, for instance, who also has his moments where he just is putting too much effort on the attack. But anyway, that's going to be it. Kir, probably still overall number 2 TVT player in the world, if not literally the 2nd best Terran player in the world. So that's always going to be tough to go up against, and his pretty normal style of TVT also worked well against GuMiHo, as we can see. So that's going to be it. Thanks for watching this best of 3, guys. Hope you enjoyed the lovely TVT, and I'll be back very soon with more StarCraft 2 action.